Good morning, church family. Here we go. Worked. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Sunday morning Bible class at the Broad Street Church of Christ. For the last 5 months, we've been seeking to answer the question, does archaeology support the Bible? Last week, we discussed the biblical history and archaeology finding for the city of Timnah, and we found that the archaeology supported the Bible's descriptions of Timnah. Then we moved on to Genesis chapter 45. Chapter 45 begins with Joseph revealing his true identity to his brothers. Verse 6 states that the famine had been going on for 2 years at this point, and Joseph expects the famine to go on for another 5 years. This makes Joseph about 39 years old. He asks his brothers to return to Jacob and bring him back to Egypt, where Joseph can take care of him and his brothers. And that brings us to verse 10. Genesis 45, verse 10. You shall live in the region of Goshen, and be near me, you, your children and grandchildren, your flocks and herds, and all that you have. So Genesis chapter 45, verse 10 gives us one place name called the region of Goshen. The origin of the name Goshen is not definitively known, and etymologists argue about its origin. In Hebrew, the term Goshen refers to a well-watered area. In Egyptian, the term Goshen means a well-watered land. So both descriptions certainly describe the eastern Nile Delta region. Note that the Bible calls Goshen a region and not a city. The Bible refers to this same area in 3 other ways. In Genesis chapter 47, verse 10, this same area is called the district of Ramses. 3 times in Genesis chapter 47, this area is referred to as the best part of the land. In Psalms 78, this area is referred to twice as the region of Zon, which is the area around the Egyptian city of Zon, known by the Greeks as Tanis. There are 2 Goshens mentioned in the Old Testament. The Egyptian region of Goshen is mentioned 11 times in the books of Genesis and Exodus. The Canaanite Goshen is mentioned 3 times in the book of Joshua. I won't be talking about the Canaanite Goshen today. I should also point out that the Bible fails to mention the Goshen Hollow right here in Jackson County. I didn't know that place existed until last week. This is a satellite image taken by NASA on July 19th, 2004. As you can see, the lower Nile Delta region is the major green area on the map. You can see why it's described as the best part of the land and why Joseph would want his family to live there. The region of Goshen is also known as the district of Ramses or the region of Zon. It's the eastern half of the lower Nile Delta region. So this is the Nile River coming up here like this, and it branches out to several branches. Goshen is this half here, the eastern half. And the southern border of this is this canal that we'll talk about in a couple of weeks. And the eastern part is this canal and wall here, at Suez Canal, as it is today. Also, we've talked several weeks ago, actually several times in the class, about Shur and the wilderness of Shur. There's a border wall here that was built by some pharaohs, I believe in the 12th dynasty, and that is the border land. Shur means border in Egyptian. And the wilderness of Shur is this area here. Any questions on that before I move on? You can certainly see why Joseph would want his family to live in Goshen, which is clearly the best part of the land. Since Goshen is a region and not a city, I put this map up to show you some of the cities in the region of Goshen that are cited in the books of Genesis, Exodus, and Numbers. So, first city I'll point out is the city of Zon. It's described in Psalms and a few other places in the Bible. The Greeks call it Tanis, and it's on the Tannic branch of the Nile. Next city is the city of Ramses, which is also the city of Avaris. Think of them as two cities separated by time, right here. I'll talk about them a little bit later. Next one is the city of Pithom, which is here. Pithom and Ramses are described in Exodus as the two store cities that the Israelis built under slave conditions under Pharaoh. And the last city mentioned in the Bible is this one here called Succoth. It's not really a city, it's really a region, and we'll talk more about it at the end of the month. Any questions about that map or any of the cities? Okay. So the first city we'll talk about is the city of Zon. The biblical city of Zon is known to archaeologists as a set of ruins next to the modern small village of San el Hagar. The city of Zon is mentioned 7 times in the Old Testament. It's mentioned once in the books of Numbers, chapter 13, verse 22, where it's stated that Hebron was built 7 years before Zon in Egypt. This would make Zon about 4,000 years old today. This is obviously before the patriarchal era. Sorry, not there yet. There's no mention of the city of Zon during the patriarchal or the Israeli conquest eras. The region of Zon is mentioned twice in Psalm 78 as the location where God did his miracles in Egypt to deliver the Israelites from slavery. Psalm 78 was written during the United Monarchy era. The rulers of Zon are mentioned 4 times in the books of Isaiah and Ezekiel in their prophecies of the destruction of Egypt during the divided kingdom era. So to summarize, biblical mentions of the city of Zon occur for the pre-patriarchal era and the united and divided kingdom eras. This slide contains a list of historical documents outside of the Bible where Zon is mentioned. The city's original Egyptian name was Ganet. The D is silent and the J is pronounced as a G. Ancient Egyptian records from the 20th to the 22nd dynasties reference this city as a significant center and capital city. These ancient documents date from the Judges era through the divided kingdom era. Assyrian king annals, such as the Prisms of Sargon II and Sennacherib, that we've talked about in this class before, mention interactions with the Egyptian pharaohs ruling from Zon during the 21st and the 22nd dynasties. These date back to the united and the divided kingdom eras. The Greek historian Herodotus wrote about the Egyptian city of Tanis in his book, The Histories, which is believed to have been written about 430 to 425 BC. This is during the post-exile Persian period. The Greek historian Diodorus Siculus wrote about the Egyptian city of Tanis in his book Bibliotheca Historica, which is believed to have been written about 60 to 57 BC during the Roman era. The Greek geographer, historian, and philosopher Strabo, wrote about the Egyptian city of Tanis in his book Geographica, which is believed to have been written about 7 to 23 AD during the Roman period. So there's plenty of historical evidence for the existence of Zoan. This slide will be a list of archaeological studies at San el Hagar, or the biblical city of Zoan. In 1798, the French Emperor Napoleon visited the site with a French scientific team, and I suspect that this visit prompted all of the future French interest in this site. In 1859, the French scholar, archaeologist, and Egyptologist Franco-Auguste Fernandin Mariette conducted a survey of San el Hagar and mistakenly identified it as the ancient city of Avaris, the capital city of the Hyksos rulers of Egypt. Archaeologists believe the site to have been Avaris for over 100 years until another site proved to be Avaris in the 1960s. Still to this day, one can find archaeology articles mistakenly stating that Tanis and Avaris are the same site. 60 years later, between 1929 and 1939, French Egyptologist Pierre Montet conducted yearly excavations. He spent most of his effort in the first 10 years working on the Temple of Amun-Ra. In 1939, he began work in the southwest corner of the temple area, which turned out to contain several royal tombs. But before he could uncover many of the tombs, his work was interrupted by the pesky outbreak of World War II. After World War II, between 1946 and 1951, French archaeologist Alexandre Lazine began yearly excavations. He focused on the royal tombs area. 17 mummies have been found so far at Tunis, at least 4 of which have been identified as pharaohs of the 21st and the 22nd dynasties. These dynasties are dated to the United and Divided Kingdom eras. So imagine Montet, you spent 10 years working at a site, you've ignored this one area, you finally pay some attention to the area, you find out the royal tombs, the war breaks out, and you never get a chance to go back and study that. Someone got all the credit. In 1965, the French archaeological mission, led by archaeologist Jean Yoyet, conducted yearly excavations until 1984. When Yoyet retired in 1985, he was succeeded by Philip H. Broussard, who made yearly excavations until 2013. So this is a picture of Tel El Hagar taken back in the 1970s. This is the temple area here, where Montet spent a lot of his time. He kind of ignored this area over here until the last year, 1939. When he started working over here, that's when he realized that that was the important part of the site here, and found the royal tombs. After the war, other archaeologists came in and discovered the tombs and the pharaohs. Any questions there? So this slide, when I'm finished, will be a comparison of the biblical history of Zoan with the archaeological findings at San el Hagar. The Bible, in Numbers chapter 31, tells us that Hebron in Canaan was built 7 years before the foundation of Zoan in Egypt. Archaeology tells us that there was a settlement at Hebron before the flood, but that settlement was destroyed at the time of the flood, and the settlement was abandoned for several hundred years until around 2000 BC. Archaeology tells us that Zoan was likely a city of worship during the 6th dynasty pharaohs. Statues of the 6th dynasty pharaohs Amenemhet II and III were found at San el Hagar. The time frame for the 6th dynasty pharaohs begins in 1991 BC, around the same time as the estimates for the rebuilding of Hebron. The Bible is silent about Zoan during the patriarchal era. Archaeology tells us that a modest temple of Amun-Ra existed at San el Hagar during this time period. The Bible is silent about Zoan during the Israeli conquest of Canaan. Archaeology tells us that in addition to the existing temple of Amun-Ra, smaller temples for Khonsu and Mut, two other Egyptian gods, were built during this same time frame. The Bible, in Psalm 78, written during the United Monarchy period, twice refer to the region, not the town of Zoan, as the place where God did his miracles to deliver the Israelites from slavery. Archaeology tells us that during the United Monarchy era, the archaeological site at San el Hagar was the capital city for the 21st dynasty pharaohs of Egypt. Pharaohs at this time period were buried near the temple of Amun-Ra at San el Hagar. Since Zoan was the capital of Egypt when Psalms was written, it is plausible that the writer of Psalm 78 would write about the current capital city while describing God's efforts of releasing the Israelite people some 2,500 years earlier. The Bible, in the books of Isaiah and Ezekiel, mention the rulers of Zoan 4 times in their prophecies in the future destruction of Egypt during the divided monarchy era. Archaeology tells us that during the divided monarchy era, the archaeological site at San el Hagar was the capital city for the 22nd dynasty pharaohs of Egypt. Pharaohs of this dynasty were buried near the temple of Amun-Ra at the archaeological site of San el Hagar. The prophecies of Isaiah and Ezekiel were fulfilled. The Bible in 2 Kings chapter 23, in 2 Chronicles chapter 35, Jeremiah chapter 46, and 2 Kings chapter 24, and other historical sources tell us that the Babylonians defeated the Egyptian pharaoh Necho II and drove the Egyptians out of Mesopotamia and out of Canaan. In summary, archaeology supports the Bible's claims about the city of Zoan. So, pending your questions, we'll move on to the next city in the region of Goshen. Got 2 questions. I'll get this one first.
I'm curious, who or what is Amun-Ra? Who or what?
Amun-Ra. I'm sorry, I thought I explained that earlier. Amun-Ra. So, Ra is the Egyptian sun god. When we talk about Pithom, I'll talk about Atum. Amun and Atum are the same. Atum is also the sun god. Think of Ra as the god of the rising sun and the midday sun, the sun that provides heat and warmth and growth and that. Atum, think of him as the setting sun, the evening sun, also the god of the underworld at night. So the temple is a temple for the sun god. Sometimes Atum, or Anum, and Ra, Amun-Ra, are combined and a single temple like the one here at Tanis, the capital city, is created to celebrate. I'm going to say both. Some people think of them as the same, some people think of them as 2 different sun gods.
So Amun-Ra's belief, not a physical person?
Amun-Ra's belief is...
Amun-Ra's just a belief and not a physical person?
It's an Egyptian god. So, yeah, obviously a false god, but
Amun-Ra have a tomb?
there's no tomb. No. It's just a temple to an idol, if you will. Yes, sir. Okay. The question is try to define dynasty in the terms of realms. I'm going to talk about this. In fact, I think I'm going to talk about it later today. There's an Egyptian historian called Manetho, and he wrote about the pharaohs of Egypt. Manetho was an Egyptian priest of Amun-Ra in the city of Heliopolis at the time that the Greeks took over Egypt. And he wanted to sort of mediate between the Egyptians and the Greeks. So he wrote this history of ancient of Egypt, and he went and listed all of the pharaohs of ancient Egypt, and he divided them into dynasties based on families. So father, son, all of a sudden this family gets thrown out, a new family comes in, that becomes a new dynasty. So a dynasty is just a family of rulers. And there were 31 dynasties before the Greeks came in. You might call the Greeks the 32nd dynasty, although no one ever does that. A generation of rulers, yeah. Now, Elizabeth and King Charles is a dynasty, if you will, in England. Other questions about zone or anything else? Okay. So this is the same map I showed you a few minutes ago about the region of Goshen. The next cities to be discussed are Avaris and Ramses. I'm going to treat these as one city with two different time periods. Avaris was built first, and Ramses was built later, partially over top of Avaris, with the rest being built to the northeast of Avaris. So I want you to think of Avaris. I'm going to use my hands as an illustration. Think of Avaris. My left hand is the city of Avaris, and think of my right hand as the city of Ramses. Avaris was built first, and then Ramses was built over top of it, partially over top of it. So they partially overlap each other. So it's more or less the same geographical region. Archaeologists consider it two different sites, and you'll see why in just a second. But it's basically two cities at the same location, separated by time. Any question there before I move on? I know that's can be complicated. Okay. This is a little more close-up map compared to the previous map. I both like and dislike this map for various reasons. This map correctly shows that the city of Avaris was built on the eastern shore of the Pelusic branch of the Nile, just before that branch divides into two separate branches. The map also correctly shows that the bulk of the city of Ramses is on this island in between the two branches. What it does not show is that a temple and a port of Ramses was built over top the northeast part of Avaris here. Most of Ramses is on this part, the southern part of this island here. And there was a port city and a temple that Ramses built right on top of Avaris. So they overlap each other. So now that we understand the geographical relationship between Avaris and Ramses, let's introduce the two cities. The ancient city of Avaris is known to archaeologists as Tel el-Dab'a. Avaris is the Greek name for the city. The Egyptians called the city Ha'at Waret, which means house of the district. Recall that in Genesis chapter 47, verse 10, Pharaoh told Joseph to settle his family in Goshen in the district of Ramses. So Avaris is the house of the district of Ramses and is most likely the most likely place that Joseph would have settled his family. Later, I'm going to show you archaeological evidence that he did just that. Avaris is known by historians as the Hyksos capital of Egypt. The Egyptian term Hyksos means rulers from foreign lands. Egyptians also referred to them as Asiatics, which to them were any people from the east, such as Canaan or Mesopotamia. The Hyksos were a West Semitic people who ruled northern Egypt during the Second Intermediate Period, roughly between 1782 and 1550 BC. There's a lot of disagreement among scholars as to what date Jacob and his family moved to Egypt. Two major camps are divided between two timelines. One timeline has Jacob entering Egypt during the Hyksos period, and the other timeline has Jacob entering Egypt about 100 years before the Hyksos time frame, during the 12th dynasty. In either timeline, the Israelites would have spent some portion of their sojourn in Egypt during the Hyksos period. So before I go into the biblical history and archaeology of Avaris, let me provide an introduction into the city of Ramses. The biblical city of Ramses is known to archaeologists as Quant-Ir. The ancient Egyptian pronunciation was Ra'amasisa. The modern Egyptian pronunciation is Ramses. I'm going to use the English Ramses for the rest of the class. The Egyptian meaning for Ramses is Ra begot. So Ra being the Egyptian god, begot. Ra is the Egyptian god of the sun and creation. Ramses can refer to a person or to a place. When Ramses is used to describe a place, the term means the land that Ra created. So the district of Ramses is the land that Ra created. When used to refer to a person, the term means the son of Ra. The city of Ramses is actually Per-Ramses in Egyptian, which means house of the son of Ra. And it's a likely reference to Pharaoh Ramses II. The city of Ramses is known by historians as the summer palace for the Pharaoh Seti I, the first, and as the capital city for his son, Ramses II, both pharaohs of the 19th dynasty. This would have been during the time frame of the judges in Israel. Note that the construction of the summer palace by Seti began 150 years after the Israelis left Egypt. So the city of Ramses did not exist at the time that the Israelis were in Egypt. Pharaoh Mereneptah, the son of Ramses II, moved the capital city away from Ramses back to Memphis after his father's death. The move was made partially due to the changing course of the river Nile, which caused the Peleustic branch of the river to silt up, causing the city of Ramses to lose its water supply. This would have been during the Judges' era in Israel. The result is that the city of Ramses was occupied by the Egyptians for only about a 100-year period. The city of Avaris is not mentioned by name in the Old Testament. The district of Ramses is mentioned once in Genesis chapter 47, verse 11, as the place where Joseph settled his fathers and brothers in Egypt. Note at this time, Ramses is referred to as a district and not a city. The city of Ramses is mentioned 4 times in the Old Testament. Once in Exodus chapter 1, verse 11. The cities of Ramses and Pithom are listed as store cities, which were built by the Israelis as slave labor under Pharaoh. This would have been after Joseph's death under, quote, a new king to whom Joseph meant nothing, unquote, end of quote. That came from Exodus chapter 1, verse 8. 3 additional times the city of Ramses is mentioned in the books of Exodus chapter 12 and Numbers chapter 13 as the starting point for the exodus from Egypt. Since the construction of the city of Ramses didn't begin until 150 years after the Israelis left Egypt, many biblical scholars believe that this reference is to the city of Avaris and not to Ramses. The inclusion of the name Ramses in the books of Exodus and Numbers would be further examples of anachronisms like the ones I've been highlighting in the book of Genesis. In fact, it's for this very reason that I've been highlighting these anachronisms as we've come across them, to demonstrate that this is not just an isolated occurrence. Many Egyptologists have staked their reputations on these mentions of Ramses as not being anachronisms. Maybe I'll pause here for just a second and explain some Egypt archaeology philosophy. Because the Bible mentions Ramses as a store city and as the starting place of the Exodus, Egyptologists for decades, for I guess over a century, have claimed that the Exodus had to have happened during the 13th century because the city of Ramses only existed during the 13th century. So, since Ramses was mentioned, had to have occurred in the 13th century. Okay, that's point one. Point two, same archaeologists claim, but there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever that there were any Israelite occupation at Ramses or anywhere else in Egypt in the 13th century, and there's absolutely no archaeological evidence whatsoever that there was an Israeli conquest in Canaan during the 13th century. So these archaeologists claim that it had to have happened during the 13th century, but it's a myth, it's a legend, it's just a story written to explain how Israel ended up in Canaan. If you follow the Bible's chronology, the Bible suggests that not specifically, but if you do the math that the Bible outlines, that the Exodus didn't occur in the 13th century, it occurred in the 15th century BC, approximately 1446 BC. So these archaeologists have staked their claim that A, it had to have happened in the 13th century, and A, because there's no evidence of it, it's a myth. Biblical archaeologists say, no, it happened in the 15th century, and I'm going to show you today and next week, there's plenty of evidence that Israel was there in the 15th century, and there's plenty of evidence, which we've already talked about in this class, about the conquest occurring during the 15th century BC. So in archaeological literature, there's this ongoing argument, still exists today, as to when did the Exodus occur, and there's these two camps that battle back and forth. Any questions about that before I move on? Okay, either I've been crystal clear or I've completely confused you. I don't know which one. So before we talk about the archaeology of Tel el-Dab'a, I'd like to go over some historical mentions of Avaris outside of the Bible. The Egyptica was a history of ancient Egypt written in the Greek language by the historian Manetho. Manetho was a high priest of Amun-Ra at Heliopolis, which is also in the biblical region of Goshen. In writing the Egyptica, Manetho attempted to mediate the Egyptian and Greek cultures at the beginning of the Hellenistic period. The Egyptica was a comprehensive history of ancient Egypt, and it continues to be a vital resource in defining Egyptian chronology. Manetho organized the ruling pharaohs into 31 dynasties, and his system continues to serve as the foundation for modern Egyptian chronology. The complete text of the Egyptica has not survived. Fragments of the text do remain to this day. Fortunately, his work was quoted by several later authors whose work do still remain. These authors include the Jewish historian Josephus and the Christian historians Africanus, Eusebius, and Syncellus. In volume 2 of his work, let me back up. In volume 2 of his work concerning dynasties 15 through 17, Manetho writes of the Hyksos, Avaris, and the Israelites. He writes about the overthrow of the Hyksos at the start of Dynasty 18. It should be noted that Manetho was no fan of the Israelites, and he's often cited as the father of anti-Semitism. Should be noted that Manetho was not the first person to mention the term Hyksos. This picture is a replica of a painting found in the tomb of Khnumhotep II, a governor of the 16th nome under Egypt, which, by the way, is the area of Goshen. During the reigns of pharaohs Amenemhat II and Senusret II of the 12th dynasty. It depicts a train of Semitic men and women and children wearing unusual, bright, multicolored garments. They are distinguished from Egyptians by their skin color, their mushroom-shaped hair, their beards, and their clothes. They are also different from the way Egyptians are usually displayed by the items that they're carrying. For example, one's carrying a harp. The uniqueness of the scene is likely a reference to a specific migration event. The bulk of scholarly opinion is that these people are migrating into Egypt from Canaan. The inscription that goes along with the painting identifies the leader as Abishi of the Hyksos. It also says that he came with an entourage of 37 people. While the timing of the migration doesn't match at all with Jacob, it matches very well with Jacob's grandfather, Abraham, and his trip to Egypt described in Genesis chapter 12. Many biblical scholars believe that Abisha is Abraham. Since the bell rang, I guess I will stop there pending your questions. No questions? Okay then, we will get ready for our worship service. Thank you very much. Next week we will continue with the city of Avaris and Ramses.